The relentless Arizona sun beat down on Willow Ross's feverish skin as she stumbled through the dusty streets of Copper Creek, a once promising mining town that had dwindled to little more than a waypoint for travelers heading west. The year was 1876, and like many young women seeking opportunity in the expanding frontier, 22-year-old Willow had journeyed from her family's struggling farm in Pennsylvania with dreams of independence and prosperity. Now, those dreams seemed to evaporate like morning dew under the merciless desert heat as she fought to remain conscious, her lungs burning with each labored breath. Miss, are you all right?" A concerned voice called out, but it sounded distant and muffled through the haze of her fever. Willow's vision blurred as the boardwalk seemed to tilt beneath her feet. The last thing she remembered before darkness claimed her was the sensation of strong arms catching her as she fell. Vaughn Thornton had not planned to stay in Copper Creek for more than a day. At 28, he had spent the last decade driving cattle across the Western Territories, saving every penny with hopes of someday purchasing land of his own. He had just delivered a herd to a buyer in Tucson and was passing through on his way north when he spotted the young woman swaying dangerously on the street ahead of him. When she collapsed, Vaughn reacted instinctively, jumping from his horse and rushing to catch her before she hit the hard, packed dirt. The heat radiating from her skin alarmed him immediately. "Someone fetch Doc Simmons," he shouted to the small crowd gathering around them. Cradling the unconscious woman, Vaughn noticed how thin and fragile she felt in his arms, her face flushed with fever beneath a thin sheen of sweat. "Doc's gone to the Wilson Ranch," an elderly shopkeeper informed him. "Their youngest came down with something fierce. Won't be back till tomorrow at earliest." Vaughn frowned, looking down at the woman's ashen face. "Is there anywhere I can take her? Does anyone know who she is?" "That's Willow Ross," offered a woman carrying a basket of laundry. "Poor thing's been working at the Golden Nugget Hotel, cleaning rooms. Been looking poorly these past few days." "Where does she live?" "She rents a room above the Mercantile." The woman pointed down the street. "But old man Jeffers won't let you in without her say-so, and she ain't saying much right now." Vaughn made a quick decision. "I've got a room at the boarding house. I'll take her there and send for the doctor when he returns." Without waiting for approval from the onlookers, Vaughn carefully mounted his horse with Willow secured in his arms and rode slowly to Mrs. Abernathy's boarding house at the edge of town. The motherly proprietress took one look at the unconscious young woman and immediately began issuing orders. "Bring her to the spare room downstairs. No sense carrying her up those steep stairs. I'll fetch cool water and clean linens." Within minutes, Willow was settled in a small but clean room off the kitchen. Mrs. Abernathy helped remove her dusty shoes and loosen her clothing for comfort, then placed a cool, damp cloth on her forehead. "Looks like mountain fever to me," Mrs. Abernathy said gravely after examining Willow's flushed face and feeling her rapid pulse. "Been seeing it around these parts lately. She needs to break this fever soon or—" She didn't finish the thought, but Vaughn understood the implication. "I'll stay with her until the doctor returns," he found himself saying, though he couldn't quite explain why he felt so responsible for this stranger. "You're a good man, Mr. Thornton." Mrs. Abernathy patted his shoulder. "I'll show you how to keep the fever down until Doc returns." For the next several hours, Vaughn diligently followed Mrs. Abernathy's instructions, replacing the cool cloths on Willow's forehead whenever they grew warm and helping her sip small amounts of water when she briefly regained consciousness. During those fleeting moments of lucidity, her hazel eyes would focus on him with confusion. "Who?" she managed once, her voice barely audible. "Name's Vaughn Thornton. Found you collapsed in the street. You're safe at Mrs. Abernathy's boarding house." She seemed to process this information slowly, her fever-addled mind struggling to make sense of her situation. "Thank you," she whispered before slipping back into unconsciousness. As evening approached, Willow's condition worsened. Her breathing became more labored, and the fever raged despite Vaughn's constant attention. When she began muttering incoherently and thrashing against the bed covers, Vaughn knew they couldn't wait for the doctor's return. "Mrs. Abernathy," he called, stepping into the kitchen where the older woman was preparing a broth. "She's getting worse. Is there anything else we can do, Mrs.?" Abernathy wiped her hands on her apron and followed Vaughn back to the sickroom. After checking on Willow, she shook her head gravely. "There's a Navajo woman who lives on the outskirts of town. Some folks call her a witch, but she knows her medicines better than anyone. She might have something that could help." "Tell me where to find her," Vaughn said without hesitation. Armed with directions, Vaughn rode through the gathering darkness to a small adobe dwelling nestled against the red rock formations outside town. The elderly Navajo woman, who introduced herself as Nijoni, listened to his description of Willow's symptoms without interruption. "The sickness that comes with the dust," she nodded knowingly, gathering various plants and roots from baskets around her home. "This will help break the fever, but she must drink it all." Vaughn thanked her profusely and offered payment, which she refused with a gentle smile. "You have a good heart, young man. That is payment enough." By the time Vaughn returned to the boarding house, Willow was burning with fever and barely responsive. Mrs. Abernathy helped him prepare Nijoni's remedy according to the instructions, brewing it into a strong, bitter-smelling tea. Getting Willow to drink the medicine proved challenging. Vaughn gently lifted her upper body, cradling her against his chest while Mrs. Abernathy held the cup to her lips. Most of the first attempt dribbled down her chin, but Vaughn persisted with patience and soft encouragement. "Come on, Willow," he urged, using her name for the first time. "You need to drink this. It'll help you get better." Whether she understood his words or simply responded to the gentle command in his voice, Willow made a visible effort to swallow the medicine on the second attempt. Over the next hour, they managed to get most of the remedy into her. "Now we wait," Mrs. Abernathy said, adjusting the bed covers. "I'll sit with her while you get some rest, Mr. Thornton. You've been at her side for hours." "I'll stay," Vaughn insisted, settling back into the chair beside the bed. "I wouldn't sleep anyway, not knowing if she'll be all right, Mrs." Abernathy studied him for a moment, a knowing look in her eyes. "Very well. Call me if there's any change." Left alone with Willow, Vaughn found himself wondering about the young woman's life. What had brought her to this remote mining town? Did she have family worried about her somewhere? Why did he feel this inexplicable need to protect her? As midnight approached, Willow's fever seemed to intensify rather than break. She tossed restlessly, occasionally calling out names Vaughn didn't recognize, perhaps family members or friends from her past. He continued to bathe her face and neck with cool water, speaking soothingly whenever she became agitated. "You're going to be fine, Willow," he assured her, hoping his words would somehow reach through her delirium. "Just keep fighting." In the darkest hour of the night, when the oil lamp had burned low and the house was silent except for Willow's labored breathing, Vaughn found himself doing something he hadn't done in years: praying. Not the formal prayers of his childhood, but earnest pleas for this stranger's life. Just before dawn, Willow's fever finally broke. Vaughn noticed the change immediately. Her breathing eased, and the flush began to fade from her cheeks. When he placed his hand on her forehead, her skin felt cooler to the touch. Relief washed over him like a cool rain after a drought, Mrs. Abernathy confirmed his assessment when she came to check on them in the early morning light. "The worst has passed," she said with obvious relief. "She'll be weak for a while, but I believe she'll recover." As if to confirm this prognosis, Willow's eyes fluttered open, clearer and more focused than they had been since Vaughn found her. She looked around the unfamiliar room with confusion before her gaze settled on Vaughn, who still sat beside her bed, exhaustion evident in the shadows under his eyes. "You stayed," she whispered, her voice hoarse but stronger than before. "I did," Vaughn confirmed with a gentle smile. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been trampled by a herd of buffalo," she admitted weakly. "But alive, thanks to you. You should thank Najoni and her medicine more than me." "And Mrs. Abernathy here." Vaughn nodded toward the boarding house keeper who was adjusting the curtains to let in more light. "Nonsense," Mrs. Abernathy huffed. "This young man hasn't left your side since he brought you here yesterday, Miss Ross. Now, let me fetch you some broth. You need to regain your strength." When they were alone again, Willow studied Vaughn's face. "Why would you do that for a stranger?" Vaughn considered the question, unsure of the answer himself. "Couldn't very well leave you in the street," he finally said with a shrug. "And once I started, well, seemed right to see it through." "Thank you," she said simply, but her eyes conveyed a deeper gratitude than words could express. Over the next few days, Willow gradually regained her strength under the watchful eyes of Mrs. Abernathy and Vaughn, who postponed his journey northward without explanation. Dr. Simmons, upon his return to town, confirmed that she had indeed contracted mountain fever and praised the quick action that had likely saved her life. "Another day without treatment, and we might be having a very different conversation," the doctor said gravely. "You're fortunate, Miss Ross, both in receiving Najoni's remedy and having such dedicated care." As Willow recovered enough to sit up and take solid food, she and Vaughn began to learn more about each other. She told him about leaving her family's struggling farm in Pennsylvania after her parents died, hoping to find work and independence in the West. "I had romantic notions about the frontier," she admitted with a self-deprecating smile. Reality proved somewhat harsher. She had been working at the Golden Nugget Hotel for 6 months, cleaning rooms and helping in the kitchen. The work was exhausting, the pay meager, but she had been saving what she could, hoping to eventually open a small dressmaking shop. "I've always had a way with a needle," she explained. "Made most of my own clothes since I was 12. In turn, Vaughn shared stories of his life as a cowboy, driving cattle across the vast western territories. He told her about growing up on a small ranch in Texas, losing his parents to a Comanche raid when he was 16, and spending the years since working for various outfits while saving for land of his own. "Where were you headed when you found me?" Willow asked on the 4th day of her recovery as they shared a simple lunch in her room. "North," Vaughn replied. "Heard there's good grazing land available near Nebraska City. Was thinking of seeing it for myself." "That's a long journey from Arizona," Willow observed. Vaughn nodded. "Wanted to see more of the country before settling. Figure once I put down roots, I'll be there for good." A week after her collapse, Dr. Simmons declared that Willow could return to her rented room above the Mercantile, though he advised against resuming work immediately. "You need at least another week of rest before you even think about scrubbing floors," he instructed firmly. "Your body needs time to fully recover." This pronouncement brought a shadow of worry to Willow's face that Vaughn didn't miss. After the doctor left, he found her sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at her hands. "What's troubling you?" he asked gently. Willow hesitated before answering. "If I don't work, I don't get paid. And if I don't get paid, I can't afford my room or food, let alone save for my shop." She looked up at him with a brave attempt at a smile. "But I'll manage somehow, I always do," Vaughn frowned, understanding her predicament all too well. The frontier was unforgiving to those who couldn't work, especially women on their own. I spoke with Mrs. Lancaster at the hotel, he said after a moment's consideration. Told her about your situation. She said your position will be waiting when you're well enough, but she can't pay me while I'm not working, Willow finished for him. I understand. She's running a business, not a charity. Vaughn leaned against the doorframe, his expression thoughtful. I've got a proposition for you if you'll hear it. Willow looked at him with cautious interest. I'm listening. I've decided to stay in Copper Creek a while longer, Vaughn began. Mrs. Abernathy has a small cabin on her property that she's offered to rent me. It's nothing fancy, but it's got 2 rooms and a decent roof. He paused, suddenly feeling uncharacteristically nervous. I thought maybe you could stay there while you recover. You could rest properly without worrying about rent, at least until you're strong enough to work again. Willow's eyes widened with surprise, then narrowed with suspicion. And what would you expect in return, Mr. Thornton? Vaughn straightened, genuinely offended by the implication. Nothing improper, Miss Ross. I'd stay at the boarding house until you're back on your feet, I just thought. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Never mind, it was presumptuous of me. As he turned to leave, Willow's voice stopped him. Vaughn, wait, I'm sorry. That was unkind after everything you've done for me. She sighed, her shoulders sagging with weariness. It's just that in my experience, generosity from men usually comes with conditions. Vaughn turned back, his expression softening as he recognized the hard-learned caution in her eyes. No conditions, Willow. You have my word. She studied him for a long moment before asking, Why are you really staying in Copper Creek? What about your plans to go north? Nebraska will still be there next month, he replied with a slight shrug. And to be honest, I'm not entirely sure why I'm staying. Just feels like the right thing to do. 2 days later, Willow moved into Mrs. Abernathy's cabin with Vaughn's help. The small structure had been vacant for some time and needed considerable work, but Vaughn had spent the previous day cleaning and making basic repairs to make it habitable. It's not much, he apologized as he carried her small trunk into the larger of the 2 rooms. But it's sturdy enough, and the stove works. Willow walked slowly around the space, still weak but improving daily. It's perfect, she said sincerely. I haven't had a place entirely to myself since leaving Pennsylvania. True to his word, Vaughn continued to stay at the boarding house, but he visited the cabin daily to check on Willow and bring supplies. He chopped firewood, patched the leaky roof, and even built a small porch where Willow could sit in the afternoons as her strength returned. During these visits, their conversations grew increasingly personal. Willow learned that beneath Vaughn's quiet, capable exterior was a thoughtful man with dreams of his own ranch and a deep appreciation for the wild beauty of the frontier. In turn, Vaughn discovered Willow's determination and resilience, qualities that had carried her through numerous hardships since her parents' deaths. I was engaged once back home, she revealed one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold and crimson. To the banker's son, my parents were so proud. What happened? Vaughn asked, noting the shadow that crossed her face. When my father's crops failed 3 years in a row and the farm was mortgaged to the hilt, my fiancée suddenly decided I wasn't such a good match after all. Her voice was matter-of-fact, but Vaughn could hear the lingering hurt beneath her words. His loss, Vaughn said simply. Willow glanced at him, a small smile tugging at her lips. That's kind of you to say. It's the truth, Vaughn insisted. Any man worth his salt would value loyalty and courage over a fat purse. You've got both in spades. As Willow's health improved, She began to insist on contributing to their arrangement, despite Vaughn's protests. She mended his clothes, which showed years of neglect, and used her limited energy to prepare simple meals when he visited. "You don't have to do this," he objected the first time he arrived to find her cooking stew with vegetables from Mrs. Abernathy's garden. "I want to," Willow replied firmly. "I've never been comfortable accepting charity, even from friends." "Is that what we are, friends?" Vaughn asked, helping her set the small table without being asked. Willow paused, ladle in hand, and considered him with those direct hazel eyes that seemed to see right through him. "Yes, I believe we are." 2 weeks after moving into the cabin, Willow felt strong enough to walk into town. Vaughn accompanied her, watchful but allowing her to set the pace. They stopped first at the Mercantile, where Willow paid what she owed on her previous room and collected mail that had arrived during her illness. "A letter from my sister in Philadelphia," she explained, tucking the envelope into her pocket. "And one from my aunt in Boston. They're my only family now." Their next stop was the Golden Nugget Hotel, where Mrs. Lancaster greeted Willow warmly but with obvious concern about her appearance, which still showed the effects of her illness. "You're not ready to return yet, dear," the hotel proprietress said decisively after looking Willow over. "Another week at least. Mrs. Lancaster, I appreciate your holding my position, but I need to work," Willow explained with quiet dignity. "Perhaps I could start with lighter duties." The older woman hesitated, glancing between Willow and Vaughn. "I could use help with mending linens and taking inventory," she finally conceded. "Nothing strenuous, mind you. Half days only until Dr. Simmons says otherwise." Relief washed over Willow's face. "Thank you, Mrs. Lancaster." "When would you like me to start?" "Monday next. That gives you another 5 days to build your strength." Her tone brooked no argument. As they left the hotel, Willow's steps were lighter despite her obvious fatigue. "That's one worry settled," she said with satisfaction. "Now I need to find out if my room is still available." "There's no rush," Vaughn said, perhaps too quickly. "The cabin is yours as long as you need it." Willow stopped walking to look at him directly. "Vaughn, you've been extraordinarily kind, but I can't impose on you indefinitely. You must have your own plans to consider." "My plans can wait," he assured her. "Besides, I'm not exactly in a hurry to leave." Something in his tone made Willow study his face more closely. "And why is that, Mr. Thornton?" Vaughn shifted uncomfortably under her scrutiny. "Maybe I'm enjoying the company," he finally admitted. The next few days established a comfortable routine. Willow gradually increased her activities as her strength returned, while Vaughn divided his time between further improvements to the cabin and odd jobs around town that helped replenish his depleted savings. On Saturday evening, Vaughn arrived at the cabin to find Willow sitting at the small table, papers spread before her, and a look of concentration on her face. "Am I interrupting?" he asked, setting down a basket of supplies from Mrs. Abernathy. "Not at all," Willow smiled, gathering the papers. "I was just working on some designs for dresses, keeping my skills sharp." Vaughn gestured to the papers. "May I see?" Looking slightly self-conscious, Willow handed him several sketches of women's garments, each accompanied by notes about fabrics and construction details. Even to Vaughn's untrained eye, they showed considerable talent and a distinctive style. "These are impressive," he said sincerely, examining each drawing with care. "You have a real gift." Willow blushed at the compliment. "They're just ideas. Someday, when I have my shop, I'll turn them into real dresses." "How much would you need?" Vaughn asked suddenly. "To start your shop, I mean." Willow looked startled by the question. "I'm not entirely sure. Enough for a small space, a good sewing machine, and initial fabrics and notions." She calculated mentally. At least $400, I suppose, though more would be better. Vaughn nodded thoughtfully but said nothing more on the subject. Instead, he produced a small package from his coat pocket. I brought you something. A welcome back to health gift, you might say. Surprised, Willow carefully unwrapped the brown paper to reveal a small leather-bound journal with a pen and ink set. Her eyes widened with pleasure. "Vaughn, it's lovely," she exclaimed, running her fingers over the soft leather cover. "But you shouldn't have spent your money on me." "It's nothing extravagant," he dismissed with a small smile. "Thought you might use it for your dress designs or whatever else you fancy." Impulsively, Willow rose and kissed his cheek. "Thank you. It's the most thoughtful gift I've received in years." The brief contact left Vaughn momentarily speechless, a warmth spreading through him that had nothing to do with the cabin's small stove. The following Monday, Willow began working half-days at the hotel as agreed. Though she returned to the cabin each afternoon visibly tired, she insisted the work was manageable and expressed satisfaction at earning wages again. "Mrs. Lancaster says I can return to full duties next week if Dr. Simmons approves," she told Vaughn over supper one evening. "And I've spoken with Mr. Jeffers about my old room. He says it's available whenever I'm ready." Vaughn concentrated on his plate, unwilling to acknowledge the disappointment her words evoked. "That's good news," he managed. Willow watched him for a moment before saying softly, "I've been thinking about what happens next." "Oh," Vaughn looked up, trying to keep his expression neutral. "Yes, you've put your own plans on hold for over a month now because of me. I can't ask you to delay any longer." "You didn't ask," Vaughn pointed out. "I chose to stay." "Nevertheless," Willow continued, "I think it's time we both considered our futures. You wanted to see land in Nebraska, and I need to resume saving for my shop." There was a long silence as Vaughn wrestled with thoughts he'd been avoiding for days. Finally, he set down his fork and looked directly at Willow. "What if our futures didn't have to be separate?" he asked quietly. Willow's eyes widened slightly. "What do you mean?" Vaughn took a deep breath. "I mean, what if I stayed in Copper Creek, or what if you came with me to Nebraska City? What if we figured things out together?" "Vaughn Thornton, are you proposing something?" Willow asked, her voice steady but her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Not exactly. Not yet." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated by his own ineloquence. "I'm just saying that I care about you, Willow, more than I expected to. And the thought of riding away and never seeing you again doesn't sit right with me." Willow's expression softened. "I care about you too, Vaughn. But caring isn't always enough. We barely know each other." "Then let's change that," Vaughn suggested earnestly. Give us a chance to find out if this could be something more." "What exactly are you proposing?" Willow asked, her practical nature asserting itself. "Stay here at the cabin a while longer. Let me court you properly. If after a reasonable time you decide there's nothing between us worth pursuing, I'll respect that and be on my way." Willow considered his words carefully. "And if I decide there is?" A slow smile spread across Vaughn's face. "Then we'll figure out the next step together. People will talk," Willow warned, though her tone lacked conviction. "Let them," Vaughn shrugged. "We know the truth. Besides, Mrs. Abernathy would testify to our good behavior before the preacher himself if needed." That drew a laugh from Willow. "She is rather formidable, isn't she?" "Terrifying," Vaughn agreed with mock solemnity. After another moment's thought, Willow nodded decisively. "Very well, Mr. Thornton. You may court me, but I'll still be taking my old room back when I return to full duties. Propriety matters, especially for a woman alone in a town like this." "Fair enough," Vaughn agreed, unreasonably pleased by her answer. "Though I hope you won't be alone for long." True to his word, Vaughn began courting Willow with an earnestness that caught the attention of Copper Creek's residents. He escorted her to and from work each day, brought flowers from Mrs. Abernathy's garden, and on Sundays when Willow didn't work, took her on picnics in the foothills outside town. During one such outing, as they sat beneath the shade of a cottonwood tree beside a small creek, Willow asked a question that had been on her mind. "Tell me honestly, Vaughn. If I hadn't fallen ill that day, if you'd ridden through town without noticing me, where do you think you'd be now?" Vaughn considered the question seriously. "Probably in Nebraska, looking at land and planning my ranch. Do you regret staying?" "Not for a single moment," he replied without hesitation. "Some things happen for a reason, Willow. Maybe I was meant to be in Copper Creek that day." "You believe in fate?" she asked, surprised. "I believe that sometimes life puts you exactly where you need to be, even if you didn't know that's where you were headed." He picked up a small stone and skipped it across the water. "My father used to say that a man makes his own luck, but God guides his steps." "My mother said something similar." Willow smiled at the memory. "She believed everything happens according to a greater plan, even the difficult things." Was she a religious woman? Devoutly so. She found comfort in her faith, especially during the hard years. Willow's expression grew distant. "I wish I had her certainty sometimes." Vaughn reached across the picnic blanket to take her hand. "What do you believe, Willow?" She thought for a moment before answering. "I believe in perseverance, in working for what you want and not giving up, even when it seems impossible." She looked at their joined hands. "And lately, I'm beginning to believe in second chances." As summer deepened into autumn, Willow's health was fully restored, and she resumed her full duties at the hotel. As promised, she moved back to her room above the Mercantile, though she spent most of her free time with Vaughn. Their courtship progressed steadily, marked by increasing affection and deepening understanding. Vaughn found himself captivated by Willow's quiet strength and determination, while she discovered in him a steadfastness and integrity that restored her faith in men's capacity for goodness. By late September, Vaughn had made a decision. He had been saving diligently from his odd jobs around town and had recently sold his horse for a good price to a passing cattle buyer. Combined with his previous savings, he had enough for what he planned. On a crisp October evening, he invited Willow to dinner at the town's only restaurant, a small establishment attached to the hotel that served basic but hearty fare. Dressed in his best clothes, which Willow had mended and pressed for him, Vaughn waited nervously at a table near the window. When Willow entered, wearing a dress of deep blue that she had altered and embellished herself, several heads turned to admire her. Vaughn stood immediately, struck anew by her natural beauty. "You look beautiful," he said simply as she joined him. "Thank you," she replied with a slight blush. "This is a special occasion, I take it." "It might be," Vaughn acknowledged with a smile. "Depends on how the evening goes." Throughout dinner, Vaughn seemed distracted, answering Willow's questions with uncharacteristic brevity and frequently checking his pocket. By the time dessert arrived, apple pie that was the restaurant's specialty, Willow's curiosity had turned to concern. "Vaughn, is everything all right? You seem troubled." Taking a deep breath, Vaughn reached across the table to take her hand. "Not troubled, nervous." "About what?" Instead of answering directly, Vaughn withdrew a small velvet pouch from his pocket and placed it on the table between them. "What's this?" Willow asked, eyeing the pouch with surprise. "Open it," Vaughn encouraged gently. With slightly trembling fingers, Willow untied the drawstring and tipped the contents into her palm. A simple gold ring with a small, sparkling diamond caught the lamplight. "Vaughn," she breathed, looking up at him with wide eyes. "Before you say anything," Vaughn said quickly, "I want you to know that this isn't just because of what happened when you were sick. These past months, getting to know you. Seeing your strength and kindness and determination, I've fallen in love with you, Willow Ross. Completely and irrevocably." He moved from his chair to kneel beside hers, taking both her hands in his. "I don't have much to offer except my heart and my promise to work hard every day to make you happy. But if that's enough, I'm asking you to be my wife." The restaurant had gone silent, all eyes on the couple by the window. Willow seemed momentarily speechless, tears gathering in her eyes. "People are staring," she whispered, a hint of her old self-consciousness showing through. "Let them," Vaughn replied, not taking his eyes from hers. "I'm not getting up until you give me an answer." A slow smile spread across Willow's face, transforming it with joy. "Yes," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Yes, Vaughn Thornton, I will marry you." The restaurant erupted in applause as Vaughn slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood to pull her into a deep, tender kiss that promised a lifetime of devotion. Later that evening, as they walked hand in hand under the star-filled sky, Willow asked the question that had been in her thoughts since his proposal. "What about Nebraska?" "Your dream of having your own ranch. Dreams can change," Vaughn replied, squeezing her hand gently. "Or rather, they can grow to include more than we originally imagined." "But you've worked so hard for that dream," Willow insisted. "I don't want you to give it up for me." Vaughn stopped walking to face her directly. "I'm not giving up anything, Willow. I still want land of my own, a place to build a life. But now I want that life to include you." "So we're going to Nebraska after all?" Willow asked, trying to understand his intentions. "Actually, I've been thinking about that," Vaughn said, resuming their walk. "There's good land available much closer than Nebraska. The Anderson place, about 10 miles outside Copper Creek. The sheep ranch. I heard Mr. Anderson was selling after his wife died, but that was months ago." "It's still available," Vaughn confirmed. "I rode out last week to look it over. It's not as large as I originally planned, about 80 acres, but the house is solid, and the land has good water. Most importantly, it's close enough to town that you could still have your dress shop if you wanted." Willow stopped in her tracks, staring at him in disbelief. "You remembered about my shop?" "Of course I did," Vaughn said, surprised by her reaction. "It's your dream, just as the ranch is mine. Why shouldn't we both have what we want?" Impulsively, Willow threw her arms around his neck and kissed him with such passion that it momentarily stole his breath. "What was that for?" he asked when they finally parted, both slightly breathless. "For being the kind of man who believes in a woman's dreams as much as his own," Willow replied simply. "Do you know how rare that is?" Vaughn tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his expression serious. "I don't know about rare, but I do know that your happiness matters to me as much as my own. That's what love means, isn't it? Wanting the best for each other, supporting each other's dreams." "Yes," Willow agreed softly. "That's exactly what it means." In the weeks that followed, Vaughn and Willow's engagement became the talk of Copper Creek. Mrs. Abernathy appointed herself unofficial wedding planner, while Mrs. Lancaster insisted that the hotel's dining room was the only suitable venue for the reception. Amidst the good-natured bustle of wedding preparations, Vaughn finalized the purchase of the Anderson property, using most of his savings for the down payment, but arranging favorable terms for the remainder. The previous owner, eager to move east to live with his daughter, even agreed to include some furniture and basic farming equipment in the sale. Willow, meanwhile, gave notice at the hotel and began preparations for her own business venture. With Vaughn's encouragement, she converted her wedding dress designs into a small portfolio that she showed to several of the wealthier women in town. Orders began to come in even before the wedding, confirming her talent and creating the beginnings of a clientele. As the wedding day approached, Willow received an unexpected letter from her sister in Philadelphia, enclosing enough money for a train ticket east. "She wants me to come home," Willow explained to Vaughn as they sat on the porch of what would soon be their ranch house. "She says there's no need for me to struggle alone in the wilderness any longer." "Do you want to go back?" Vaughn asked, trying to keep his voice neutral despite the sudden fear gripping his heart. Willow looked at him with surprise. "Of course not. My home is here now with you." She squeezed his hand reassuringly. "I wrote back immediately to tell her about our engagement and to invite her to the wedding, though I doubt she'll come all this way." "What about your aunt in Boston? Did you write to her as well?" "Yes, though she's unlikely to approve. She always thought my coming west was a terrible mistake." Willow smiled ruefully. "She'll be even more convinced when she learns I'm marrying a cowboy instead of a banker or lawyer." "Does that bother you?" Vaughn asked, a hint of insecurity showing through his usual confidence. "Not in the slightest," Willow assured him, leaning against his shoulder. "I've had enough of men who value status and money above character and kindness." On a bright November morning, with the distant mountains dusted with early snow, Vaughn Thornton and Willow Ross were married in Copper Creek's small church. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, attended by nearly everyone in town. Mrs. Abernathy wept openly from the front pew while Mrs. Lancaster beamed with maternal pride. Willow wore a dress of ivory silk that she had designed and sewn herself, embellished with delicate embroidery that showcased her skill. Vaughn, in a new suit purchased specifically for the occasion, couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked down the aisle to join him before the minister. "Never seen a man look at a woman with such devotion," the blacksmith's wife whispered to her neighbor. "That's a marriage that will last." The reception at the Golden Nugget Hotel was a lively affair, with music provided by a local fiddler and enough food to feed twice the number of guests present. Even Nijoni attended, presenting the couple with a woven blanket of intricate design and a small pouch of herbs for health and fertility. As the celebration continued, Vaughn pulled his new wife aside for a moment of privacy in the hotel's small garden. "Happy, Mrs. Thornton?" he asked, still savoring the sound of her new name. "Deliriously so, Mr. Thornton," Willow replied, her eyes shining with joy. "Though I still can't quite believe how much my life has changed in just a few months." "All because you collapsed in the street in front of me," Vaughn teased gently, his arms encircling her waist. "I think I'll stick with my mother's explanation," Willow countered, resting her hands on his chest. "Everything happens according to a greater plan. Even the difficult things, especially those," Willow nodded thoughtfully. "If I hadn't been ill, you would have ridden through town without stopping. We would never have met, never have fallen in love." "A high price to pay for happiness," Vaughn observed. "Worth every moment," Willow assured him before rising on tiptoe to seal her words with a kiss. That evening, Vaughn drove his bride to their new home in a wagon borrowed from a neighbor. Though they had both been to the house several times during the purchase process, this was the first time they would cross the threshold as husband and wife. To Willow's surprise, Vaughn stopped the wagon at the edge of the property rather than continuing to the house. "Why are we stopping?" she asked, confused. "Tradition," Vaughn explained with a grin, climbing down from the wagon seat and coming around to her side. Before she could question further, he lifted her into his arms. "Vaughn," she exclaimed with a laugh, "you don't have to carry me all the way to the house." "Not all the way," he conceded, setting her gently on her feet. "But I want us to walk the last part together, hand in hand. This is our land now, Willow, our home." In the fading light, they walked slowly up the path to the modest but sturdy house that would be the center of their life together. When they reached the porch, Vaughn swept Willow into his arms once more. Now this part is non-negotiable, he declared, carrying her across the threshold into their home. Inside, Willow gasped in surprise. The main room had been transformed since her last visit. Fresh curtains hung at the windows, a colorful rug covered the plank floor, and a cheerful fire blazed in the hearth. "When did you do all this?" she asked in wonder, taking in the small touches that had turned the bare house into a home. "Had some help from Mrs. Abernathy and a few others," Vaughn admitted, setting her down but keeping an arm around her waist. "Wanted it to be special for you." "It's perfect," Willow whispered, leaning into his embrace. Later, as they lay together in their new bed, the connection between them deepened into a physical expression of their love. Vaughn's tenderness and patience helped ease Willow's initial nervousness, transforming it into a shared experience of discovery and joy. In the quiet aftermath, with Willow's head resting on his chest and his arms encircling her protectively, Vaughn made a silent vow to spend the rest of his life ensuring her happiness. "What are you thinking?" Willow asked softly, feeling the intensity of his emotions in the way his arms tightened around her. "That I'm the luckiest man alive," Vaughn replied honestly, "and that I'll never stop being grateful that I was in Copper Creek on the day you needed help." The first year of their marriage brought both joys and challenges as they adjusted to life on the ranch. Vaughn worked tirelessly to improve the property, repairing fences, expanding the small barn, and preparing fields for planting. With his background in cattle, he invested in a small herd to establish his own breeding stock, carefully selecting animals suited to the local conditions. Willow, meanwhile, divided her time between managing their household and building her dressmaking business. Word of her skills spread beyond Copper Creek, bringing clients from neighboring settlements and even from Tucson. She converted a small room off the kitchen into a workspace, filling it with fabrics, patterns, and eventually, the sewing machine Vaughn surprised her with on their first Christmas together. "How did you afford this?" she asked in astonishment, running her hand over the gleaming new machine. "Sold some calves earlier than I planned," Vaughn admitted with a shrug. "Figured your business would grow faster with proper equipment." "But the ranch needs that money," Willow protested. "The ranch needs a happy, successful wife more," Vaughn countered, kissing her forehead. "Besides, I have it on good authority that this investment will pay for itself many times over." He was right. With the machine, Willow could take on more work and complete it faster, significantly increasing her income. By the spring, her dressmaking earnings were contributing substantially to their household funds, allowing them to reinvest more in the ranch's development. Their partnership extended beyond financial matters. Willow learned to help with the livestock when needed, particularly during calving season, while Vaughn assisted with her business by building display forms and delivering finished garments to town when Willow was too busy to go herself. In late summer, as they approached their first anniversary, Willow made a discovery that brought both joy and apprehension. After several days of morning sickness that she tried unsuccessfully to hide, Vaughn insisted she see Dr. Simmons. "Just as I suspected," the doctor confirmed after examining her. "You're about 2 months along, Mrs. Thornton. Congratulations." Vaughn's face lit up with such unrestrained happiness at the news that Willow's initial worries about managing her business while pregnant began to fade. His obvious delight was infectious, and by the time they reached home, she found herself sharing his excitement. "We'll need to prepare a nursery," Vaughn said that evening as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset. "The small room next to ours would be perfect." "But that's where I store my fabrics and supplies," Willow pointed out. "We'll build you a proper workroom," Vaughn decided immediately. Add an extension off the kitchen with better light for sewing. I've been meaning to do that anyway. Touched by his automatic prioritization of her needs, Willow leaned against him with a contented sigh. You're going to be a wonderful father, Vaughn Thornton. And you'll be an amazing mother, he replied, placing his hand gently over her still flat stomach. Our child is lucky already. As Willow's pregnancy progressed, Vaughn's protectiveness intensified. He took on more household chores, insisted she rest frequently, and fretted whenever she seemed tired or uncomfortable. Though occasionally amused by his hovering, Willow understood it stemmed from deep love and the memory of how close he'd come to losing her to illness before they'd truly found each other. I'm pregnant, not made of glass, she reminded him gently one day when he objected to her carrying a basket of laundry. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, you know. Not my baby, Vaughn replied stubbornly, taking the basket from her hands. And not my wife. I'm allowed to worry about you both. As winter settled over the ranch, bringing shorter days and occasional snowfall, Willow's preparations for the baby intensified. She sewed tiny garments in the evenings while Vaughn worked on the nursery, crafting a cradle from wood harvested on their own land and painting the walls a cheerful yellow. Yellow is good for a boy or a girl, Willow approved, watching him work. Though I'm convinced it's a boy. He kicks like he's trying to herd cattle already. Takes after his mother, Vaughn teased, dodging the cushion she threw at him. Their first child, a healthy boy they named James William Thornton, arrived on a cold February morning in 1878 after a difficult but ultimately uncomplicated labor. Vaughn, who had paced anxiously outside the bedroom door throughout most of the night, was finally summoned by Mrs. Abernathy, who had come to assist as midwife. "Come meet your son, Mr. Thornton," she said with a tired but satisfied smile. "A fine, strong boy with a good set of lungs." The sight of Willow, exhausted but radiant, holding their newborn son in her arms, struck Vaughn with such powerful emotion that he could barely speak. He approached the bed cautiously, as if afraid to disturb the perfect tableau before him. "He has your chin," Willow said softly as Vaughn perched beside her, staring in wonder at the tiny, red-faced infant, "and your stubborn expression." "Poor child," Vaughn managed to joke, though his voice was thick with emotion. "One stubborn parent was enough." When Willow carefully transferred their son into his arms, Vaughn felt a surge of protectiveness, unlike anything he had ever experienced. This tiny being, this perfect combination of himself and the woman he loved, was now the center of his universe alongside Willow. "Hello, James," he whispered, gently touching the baby's tiny hand. "I'm your pa. Your ma and I have been waiting for you for a long time." The baby's fingers curled reflexively around Vaughn's larger one, creating an instantaneous bond that Vaughn knew would last a lifetime. "He knows you already," Willow observed, her eyes filling with happy tears. "Just look at how he holds on to you." "I'll never let him down," Vaughn promised, looking from his son to his wife with fierce determination. "Either of you." The addition of James to their family brought new challenges and deeper joys to the Thornton household. Willow, recovering from childbirth, found herself navigating the unfamiliar territory of motherhood while trying to maintain her dressmaking business. Vaughn, meanwhile, took on additional responsibilities to allow Willow more time with the baby, often working from dawn until well after dark to ensure the ranch continued to prosper. "You're exhausting yourself," Willow scolded one evening when Vaughn returned to the house long after supper time, his face drawn with fatigue. "The work will still be there tomorrow." "Spring planting won't wait," Vaughn reminded her, though he gratefully accepted the plate of reheated food she placed before him. And the new calves need checking twice daily. Then hire some help, Willow suggested, not for the first time. Jenkins' oldest boy is looking for work and he knows cattle. Vaughn hesitated, his natural independence warring with practical necessity. We should save the money for what, Vaughn? Willow interrupted gently. We're doing well. The ranch is profitable, my business is thriving, and our son needs his father to be present, not collapsed from overwork. Put that way, Vaughn found it hard to argue. The next day, he rode to the Jenkins farm and offered young Thomas a position as ranch hand. The arrangement proved beneficial for everyone. Thomas was eager to learn and worked hard, allowing Vaughn more time with his family while ensuring the ranch continued to develop. As spring blossomed into summer, life settled into a new rhythm. James grew rapidly, developing a sunny disposition that charmed everyone he met. Willow gradually resumed her full workload, with Vaughn often taking the baby while she met with clients or worked on complex projects. Never thought I'd see the day, Mrs. Lancaster remarked during a visit to the ranch, watching as Vaughn expertly changed his son's diaper while Willow discussed a wedding dress commission with the banker's daughter. A cowboy who's as comfortable with a baby as he is with a bronco. James is considerably less likely to throw me, Vaughn replied with a grin, lifting his son into the air to elicit a delighted gurgle. By their second wedding anniversary, the Thornton ranch had expanded to include additional grazing land purchased from a neighboring property, and Willow's dressmaking business had grown to the point that she occasionally employed an assistant from town. Their partnership, both personal and professional, continued to strengthen as they faced life's challenges together. One afternoon in early spring of 1880, as Willow sat on a blanket in the meadow beside their house, watching James toddle after butterflies while she sketched new dress designs, she noticed a rider approaching from the direction of town. Recognizing Thomas Jenkins' lanky form, she waved in greeting, then frowned as she noted the unusual speed of his approach. "Thomas, what's wrong?" she called as he reined in his horse and dismounted hastily. "Telegram for Mr. Thornton," the young man replied, slightly out of breath. "Mr. Peterson at the telegraph office said it seemed urgent, so I offered to bring it out right away." A flutter of anxiety passed through Willow as she accepted the folded paper. "Vaughn's checking the north pasture fences. Would you mind watching James while I find him?" Thomas agreed readily, immediately sitting down on the blanket and engaging the toddler with a small wooden horse he produced from his pocket. Gathering her skirts, Willow hurried toward the barn to saddle her mare. She found Vaughn exactly where she expected, mending a section of fence that had been damaged by a fallen tree. The sight of her approaching at a gallop brought him immediately to attention, dropping his tools and rushing to meet her. "What is it?" he asked as she dismounted, his eyes quickly scanning her for any sign of injury. "Is it James?" "James is fine," she assured him quickly, handing him the telegram. "This just arrived. Thomas said it seemed urgent." Vaughn opened the paper with hands that suddenly trembled slightly. As he read the brief message, his expression shifted from concern to shock. "It's from a lawyer in San Antonio," he explained, his voice strangely distant. "My Uncle Patrick died last month. Apparently, he left his entire ranch to me, 500 acres along the Guadalupe River. The lawyer needs me to come to Texas to sign the papers and take possession." "Your Uncle Patrick," Willow repeated, confused. "You've never mentioned him." Vaughn ran a hand through his hair, his expression troubled. "He was my father's older brother. They had a falling out years before I was born, something about a woman they both courted. After my parents died, he offered to take me in, but I was 16 and too angry at the world to accept help from a man my father had disowned. And now he's left you his ranch, Willow said softly, understanding the complex emotions this unexpected inheritance must be stirring. What will you do? I don't know, Vaughn admitted, folding the telegram and tucking it into his pocket. I need to think. That evening, after James was asleep in his crib, Willow and Vaughn sat at their kitchen table, discussing the implications of the telegram. The lamp between them cast warm light on their serious faces as they considered options. 500 acres in Texas, Willow mused, turning her teacup in her hands. That's a significant property. 6 times what we have here, Vaughn nodded, his expression still troubled. Prime grazing land, according to the lawyer. And the house is supposed to be quite substantial, built by my grandfather before the war. It sounds like a wonderful opportunity, Willow said carefully, studying her husband's face. Are you considering moving there? Vaughn looked up sharply. Would you want to? Leave everything you've built here. Your business, your clients, our friends. I would follow you anywhere, Vaughn, Willow replied simply. You know that. The question is what you want. Vaughn rose from the table and moved to the window, staring out at the darkened landscape of the ranch they had built together. I never expected this, he admitted. When I left Texas after my parents died, I swore I wouldn't go back. Too many painful memories. But this could be a chance to make new memories, Willow suggested, coming to stand beside him. A legacy for James and any other children we might have. Turning to face her, Vaughn took her hands in his. I need to go to San Antonio, at least to sort out the legal matters. But I won't decide anything about our future without you, Willow. This affects all of us. Then we'll go together, Willow decided firmly. James and I will accompany you to Texas. We can see this ranch, meet the people who worked for your uncle, and make an informed decision as a family. The journey to San Antonio proved more challenging than anticipated with a 2-year-old in tow. But Willow's careful planning and Vaughn's attentive care made it manageable. They arrived in early May, when the Texas hill country was ablaze with wildflowers, and the air carried the scent of blooming magnolias. Patrick Thornton's lawyer, a dignified gentleman named Edgar Montgomery, met them at the train station with a carriage to transport them to the ranch. Your uncle spoke of you often, Mr. Thornton, Montgomery informed Vaughn as they traveled through the lush countryside. Regretted the rift with your father until his dying day, but he was too proud to make amends directly. This inheritance was his way of acknowledging you as family. Vaughn absorbed this information silently, his hand tightening around Willow's as the carriage crested a hill to reveal a sprawling ranch nestled in a verdant valley. The main house, a 2-story structure of native limestone with a wide veranda, stood on a gentle rise overlooking the property. Welcome to Thornton Ranch, Montgomery announced as the carriage approached. Your inheritance, Mr. Thornton. The next several days were a whirlwind of legal meetings, introductions to the ranch staff, and exploration of the extensive property. Vaughn discovered that his uncle had been a respected cattleman with progressive ideas about land management and breeding. The ranch was not only substantial but prosperous, with a well-established herd and experienced employees who seemed cautiously optimistic about working for Patrick's nephew. Willow, meanwhile, found herself unexpectedly drawn to the gracious main house with its spacious rooms and beautiful craftsmanship. She was particularly taken with the light-filled parlor that would make an ideal workspace for her dressmaking. You could have a proper shop in town as well, Vaughn suggested as they discussed possibilities one evening. San Antonio is growing rapidly. There would be more clients here than in Copper Creek. I've been thinking the same thing, Willow admitted. And James would have advantages here that our little ranch can't provide, better schools eventually, exposure to more people and ideas. Vaughn studied his wife's face in the lamplight. "You're seriously considering this, aren't you? Moving to Texas?" "I'm considering what's best for our family," Willow corrected gently. "This is an incredible opportunity, Vaughn. A chance to build something substantial that we can pass on to our children. And our ranch in Arizona, the life we've built there. We could sell it to Thomas Jenkins' family," Willow suggested. "They've been looking to expand, and Thomas already knows the operation inside and out." Vaughn rose and walked to the window, staring out at the unfamiliar landscape that was, by birthright, now his. "I never expected to return to Texas," he said quietly. "Never thought I'd want to." "Is it painful being here?" Willow asked, coming to stand beside him. "Being so close to where you lost your parents?" "Surprisingly, no," Vaughn admitted. "It feels right somehow. Like completing a circle I didn't know needed closing." The next morning, as dawn broke over the hills, Vaughn rode out alone to the far reaches of the property. He needed time to think, to reconcile his past with the unexpected future now before him. As the sun rose higher, illuminating the vast expanse of his inheritance, he found his thoughts turning not to what had been lost, but to what might be gained not just for himself, but for Willow and James and any other children they might have. When he returned to the house, he found Willow on the veranda, watching James play with a puppy that one of the ranch hands had brought for the boys' entertainment. The sight of them, his family against the backdrop of Thornton Ranch, suddenly crystallized everything in Vaughn's mind. "I think we should stay," he said without preamble, dismounting and climbing the steps to join them. "Make this our home." Willow's face lit with a smile that confirmed she had reached the same conclusion. "I was hoping you'd say that," she admitted, rising to meet him. "It feels right, doesn't it? Like this is where we're meant to be." The decision made, they threw themselves into preparations for the transition. Vaughn sent a detailed letter to Thomas Jenkins, offering to sell the Arizona ranch on favorable terms that would allow the young man and his family to take over without crippling debt. Willow corresponded with her regular clients in Copper Creek, recommending a skilled seamstress in Tucson who could meet their needs, while beginning to establish connections in San Antonio society. By midsummer, the arrangements were complete. With a combination of sadness and excitement, the Thorntons bid farewell to their first home together and embraced their new beginning in Texas. The years that followed proved their decision sound. Under Vaughn's thoughtful management, Thornton Ranch flourished, expanding its operations and earning a reputation for quality livestock and fair dealings. Willow's dressmaking business transitioned successfully to San Antonio, where her unique designs quickly attracted a devoted clientele among the city's prominent families. Their family grew as well. In 1882, Willow gave birth to a daughter they named Catherine Elizabeth, followed 2 years later by another son, Michael Robert. The spacious ranch house, once too large for a family of 3, gradually filled with the sounds of children's laughter and the comfortable bustle of a thriving household. On a warm evening in the spring of 1886, as Willow and Vaughn sat on their veranda watching their children play on the lawn, she leaned against his shoulder with a contented sigh. "You ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" she asked softly. "If I hadn't fallen ill that day in Copper Creek, if you hadn't been passing through at that exact moment," Vaughn's arm tightened around her shoulders. "I try not to dwell on what might have been," he admitted, "but I thank God every day for whatever fate or providence put me in your path. Even though nursing me back to health delayed your plans and changed your life completely," Willow teased gently. "Especially because of that," Vaughn replied seriously. "Some detours lead exactly where we're meant to go, even if we don't recognize it at the time. As the sun set over Thornton Ranch, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Vaughn reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From a chance encounter on a dusty street in a small Arizona town to building a life together in Texas, every step, even the difficult ones, had been worthwhile. The illness that had once left Willow weak and unable to work had ultimately given them both the greatest strength of all, the love they shared and the family they had created together. And as Vaughn had promised on that first day when he found her collapsed in the street, he had never left her side, not through illness or health, joy or hardship. Some commitments, Vaughn knew as he gazed at his wife's face in the fading light, were meant to last a lifetime. And theirs had only just begun.